It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We got multiple topics with multiple teams today. We're going to lead off about the Pittsburgh Steelers with Ray Fittipaldo, talking about our new big board draft rankings that we've been putting out. They're not yet on the website of the Post-Gazette, but we'll give you a sneak peek into Ray's look at the offensive line and where the Steelers might get their reinforcements for the offensive line in the NFL draft this year. Then we go to Noah Hiles with the Pittsburgh Pirates and their hot start. Is this a hot start that can be better than last year's and not fall off a cliff in May? All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. We're going to talk a lot of Steelers draft in this show, especially because we've been taking a closer look at how the offensive line class is building, especially at center and tackle. We'll get more on that in a second here. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of the daily content that comes out from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers, as well as the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. And as always, the show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today because they have over 20 televisions. They've just gotten new renovations, and it's a great place to enjoy before, during, or after Pirates games, where they give you over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. More on Mike's Beer Bar later. Ray, we got updated big board rankings, something I, and Brian all worked down and contributed to over the weekend. You were responsible for the offensive line, and Mike Tomlin talked about this at the owners' meeting, saying that this is going to be an offense that's going to be led by its offensive line. They want to control the ground, and that the team has talked about this being a focal point. But if there's one position that they have not addressed much in free agency, it's the offensive line. They've gotten a new corner in Dante Jackson. They've gotten a new linebacker in Patrick Queen. They've gotten a new safety in Deshaun Elliott. You're looking at these guys. They've gotten a whole new quarterback room. But the offensive line that's supposed to be a better group this year didn't get any support there. In fact, they lost Mason Cole as they cut him. We've talked about the potential of bringing him back, and maybe the thought of that, down the line. But when you look at your rankings at specifically center and tackle, because those are the two weaknesses that everyone looks at, replacing Dan Moore and replacing Mason Cole, where do you see as far as the best options for the Steelers to realistically address either one of those positions or even both in this NFL draft?
Yeah, listen, Chris, I tend to think that the Steelers will not draft a center in round one. So I think if you're looking for a spot there, round two or round three, but really, honestly, it depends on how quickly these centers go off the board. Is Jackson Powers Johnson going to be a guy who gets picked maybe at 20 by the Steelers, or more than likely, is he a guy who's going to be maybe late first round, early second round? And then do you see a domino effect with, okay, people are going to start taking centers early second round, mid-second round. Maybe that's where guys go off the board. The one change I did make on my big board for centers was I flip-flopped Graham Barton and Zach Frazier. I now have Barton as my number 2 behind JPJ, and I have Frazier as my number 3. You see Barton starting to gain some traction among the draft analysts. You even see him above JPJ in some top 50 lists and some mock drafts that you see. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. But as I sit here now, what are we, 17, 18 days away from the draft? I don't know that any center is going to be taken in the top 20 to 25 picks. I just think it's going to be a position that teams wait on, and they're going to get their tackles first, because this is a very deep and very talented tackle class.
Agreed there, especially on the tackle class. And part of it's also, one, center isn't a position of value as much as it used to be in the NFL. And plus, I don't think that there's a clear-cut, super dominant center in this class right now. Like even Graham Barton, who was the best testing guy who could potentially play center. Wasn't traditionally a center at Duke. He played all the different positions, and people are talking about him like he's an offensive tackle. And, maybe he could be a center, maybe he could be a guard, but that flexibility is what makes him really good. And he tested extremely well. And I think that's what people are looking at both at the combine and in his pro day. People are like, wow, that guy can move. That guy's athletic. We could figure out a way to make him work somewhere on our offensive line. So I get the thing behind that. But Jackson Powers Johnson, he doesn't wow you in a lot of respects. He does a lot of things well. Like it's not like he's going to be a bad center or anything like that. But like when we've made this comparison before. But Marquise Pouncey, when he was coming out of the draft, everyone was like, yeah, that's going to be a guy. That's going to be a dog. Like he's going to be a difference maker. And it's just, there's guys that maybe could be that. A lot of people like Zach Frazier, but his season-ending injury last year kind of derailed his chance to be in that position. So there's a lot of things that play into the center position, not exactly being the Steelers' top target if they were to stay put at 20th overall, or even make a first-round pick there. But offensive tackle, like you said, is the position where that's the high value position on the offensive line. If you look at NFL analysts and what's the most important things, having the best offensive tackles is the most important to a lot of people in today's football. And like you said, there's a lot of talented tackles. There's some guys the Steelers probably won't be able to touch based off of just where we project them to be, like Joe Alt. He's I think bar none, he's like the highest ranked offensive lineman. He's probably going top 10. The Steelers wouldn't be able to sniff him. Olu Fashanu out of Penn State is another guy that kind of sits like that, though some people have him dropping down the board a little bit. But who are your top, if you were to pick 3 tackles right now who the Steelers should prioritize for the first round as far as options, who would they be in your mind?
So if I was going to prioritize them, and that's a little different than how we have our big board, because our big board is more of a prediction of who's going to be there when the Steelers did pick. But if I had to prioritize right now, Chris, I would say, just based on the pre-draft process, how I saw them react to guys at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, and then the pre-draft visits, my gut feeling right now tells me they like Fuaga the best. And then I think I want to wait to see if J.C. Latham comes in for a visit. I think Latham is really talented. I think he's got a chance to be really special. And then Amarius Mims. Steelers went to his pro day. He was in for a visit as well, along with Fuaga. So for me right now, if I had to take an educated guess on where their big board was, I would say Fuaga number 1, then Latham, Mims 2, 3. But I just don't think Fuaga is going to be there at 20. So our big board is a little bit different in that respect.
I know, I feel you on that. And looking at how they've done things, every time, a big reason why you and everyone around the Steelers report about who comes in and visits is because traditionally the players that the Steelers select in the first round are guys that were a top 30 visit. Top brass visited their pro day, and they were a combine interview there. And so far, Amarius Mims is the only offensive tackle that fits that complete billing. Now, Tailese Fuaga is a little different because he's out in Oregon State, and rarely does the Steelers top brass go out to the West Coast for pro days. But the Steelers did send, I think it was Pat Meyer out there for that. So they've had him for a top 30 visit. They talked to him at the Senior Bowl, and they've had their offensive line coach go talk to him. But like you said, J.C. Latham, it'll be very interesting if they bring him in. Then he will also be he will then join Amarius Mims as one of 3 players now total that have had the Tomlin trifecta of the NFL Combine invite, the top brass at their pro day, and the top 30 invite, because right now Latham was a formal combine interview, and of course he was the Tomlin was at his pro day along with Omar Khan and the top brass there. So I hear you on J.C. Latham there. Now we talked about as far as where the Steelers priority. You've talked before about how it's looking more and more like Amarius Mims. What would he bring to the table versus those 2 other guys as far as like potential, what you've seen, and just how you understand their talent stacking up against each other?
Yeah, those other guys have more experience. Those other guys are older. But with Amarius Mims, there was just tons of potential, Chris. I mean, you look at this guy's athletic profile, you look at his size. There aren't guys who are 6'8", 340, 350 pounds who move the way he does. There are very few people on the face of this earth that have that combination of size and athleticism. So, the concerns about Amarius Mims, quite honestly, it's twofold. It's only having 8 college starts on his resume, and it's the fact that he was injured for a chunk of last season and missed some time, and he wasn't really able to have really even one full season as a full-time starter at Georgia. So there are those concerns, but when you look at the athletic profile and you kind of project what these guys are going to be maybe 2 and 3 years down the road, I think there could be a debate there that Amarius Mims might be the best or one of the best tackles in this class, but there's also the chance that, okay, maybe he's got more of a bust factor because of the injuries and just the lack of experience. So it's a tough call on him, but if you're really confident about his makeup and you did your homework at Georgia and those people tell you the right things, then I think he'd be a really solid pick at 20 if he's there.
Absolutely. He's Ray Fittipaldo. You can check out all of our big board. Our big board has not, as of right now, been officially updated with all of our picks, but we have worked on them. We have put them together. We're kind of just assembling it to go on the website. But Post-Gazette.com for all of our NFL draft coverage on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ray will be back with us at some point later this week, as well as Brian Batko. But we got to turn to the Pittsburgh Pirates because they are playing very well right now. We'll do that with Noah Hiles in a sec. But first, remind you, best place to go and enjoy the Pittsburgh Pirates, especially when they're on the road, is Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all Pittsburgh. Mike's Beer Bar is right across the street from PNC Park. You can go to Mike's Beer Bar today. They have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And they're always switching new ones in and out so that you're never running out of options. And when you're there, they have over 20 televisions. So whether you want to check out a Pirates game while they're away, or go there before there and catch out other sporting events, or go there after there to catch out other sporting events while you're in the North Shore, it's the best place to go. They also have amazing food like their steak on a stone, where they bring out you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone, and every time you cut off a piece, you just press it into the stone and you choose how well done you want every single bite of your steak. It's Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. Get there today. When you do, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We switch topics over to the Pittsburgh Pirates, who right now have the best record in baseball, tied with the New York Yankees at 8-2. They sit atop the NL Central position. Joining me is my former beat partner and good friend, Noah Hiles, who covers the Pirates for us here at the Post-Gazette. Read all his work at post-gazette.com. Noah, I have to ask, before we get into all the things that the Pirates are doing well, is this a team that you can believe more in than the team last year that started red hot in April and then fell off of a cliff?
I think so, yes. When I say I like the way you phrase that question, believe more in, because I don't think this is going to be a 100-win team or whatever this win percent. I don't think they're going to win 80% of their games for the rest of the year. And I don't even necessarily believe right now that this is probably a division winning team. I still think that there's going to be some sort of regression to the norm, to the mean. But I do think that I think this team has a better chance to sustain success from, and carry on from its hot start compared to last year. There's a couple of factors as to why. Okay. First things first, last year's team I actually think was a little older by average age. I think I calculated it. I think this year's club is 1 year younger on average. However, the veteran presence on this year's team is different. You've got a lot of guys who have won World Series championships on this team. Aroldis Chapman, Martin Perez, Michael A. Taylor. These guys have played big-time baseball before. Yes, there were veterans on last year's club as well who had been in big game situations. But I think those guys were more just kind of side pieces, where the guys that I just named are key parts of your team. Michael A. Taylor, your everyday starting center fielder. Aroldis Chapman's been probably your best bullpen arm through this point in the season. And Martin Perez has been probably your best starter, or one of them. So the fact that you have those three guys, and there are others too, who have played really meaningful baseball, that's one thing I think going for this club, where the veterans, and again, last year's team had veterans as well who had played in big games. Carlos Santana played in the World Series. Rich Hill played a lot of postseason baseball, but I think that these guys have a bigger impact, which means something. The second thing that I think this team has going for it, where it won't collapse after a really good start, is O'Neal Cruz is healthy. knock on wood. That was something where in the 9th game of the season last year, O'Neal Cruz broke his ankle. On the 9th game of this year's season, he hit a walk-off single to beat the Baltimore Orioles. He's around, and with him healthy last year, that team probably flirts with going 500. And if it's competitive in July last year with him, who knows what they do at the deadline? Maybe they make moves and they're competing for the postseason at that time last year. And I obviously understand that injuries are a part of your season and you can't play shoulda, coulda. I'm just saying that that's a big difference with having him at shortstop, having him in the lineup. That's going to make this team a little bit more capable to continue its winning ways. And the final note I have on just the note of sustainability is the guys learned from last year. A lot of the players that you see out there this season were a part of that team that started 20-8 or whatever it was last year. The Brian Reynoldses, the Brian Hayeses, the Mitch Kellers, the David Bednars, and even the role guys like the Connor Joes of the team. They were around when everyone was hot and then everyone cooled off. And I think that just going through that experience together, where a lot of those guys were younger players at the time, now they're maybe established veterans a little bit more. So I think those are some factors where, again, I'm not saying that they're going to continue winning at this pace. I don't expect them to win 8 of every 10, but I think that they might be able to make better use of this cushion that they've provided themselves with, as opposed to last year where it evaporated pretty quickly.
Right, I feel you on that, and that's where I'm just wondering what's the sustainability of this, because part of this, and Jason and I talked about this on the show last year when we saw them. It was like, how will this team deal with a slump? How will they respond when like something bad happens? And they didn't respond well. It took them way too long to get out of bad things, but a lot of things that trend well for this team. They have the 3rd most hits in Major League Baseball, the second most